Okay, the recording has started.
Okay. My name is Castellana de Andalucia. My pronouns are they, them, and this is DEI Terms and Definitions Part 2. Part 1 was this morning, but the two classes do not hinge on each other. So if you missed Part 1, this class stands on its own. My email is itsme@roxyj.com, and you can contact me on Facebook at Roxy J. Elliott. Due to some mental health and physical disability issues, I don't always respond immediately, but if you are patient with me, I promise I will respond. I am more than happy and willing to carry on conversations about this class, this morning's class, or any other classes I teach. I love talking about this stuff and would love to hear from you. A lot of the topics and definitions that we're going to talk about today are pretty heavy topics. So if you need to leave in the middle of the class for any reason, you don't need to give a reason. You don't need to apologize. Please take care of your energy. So the reason for this class, and I explained it a little bit earlier, is if we are going to try to build a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive SCA, we need to all be speaking the same language. And since a lot of us have been interacting almost exclusively online for this last year, and specifically because the political climate has been the way it is, a lot of these terms involving or surrounding, I apologize for my son. Hi, baby. Can you go back in your room, please? Back in your room, please. Hi, thank you. Back in your room. A lot of these terms surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion are kind of being thrown around like confetti. And if the original, or not even original, but if their definitions were ever known, a lot of it is getting lost. So I wanted to offer these concepts and their definitions so that we can all be on the same page, so that when we have these discussions, we can all have a foundation to start from. My safe space disclaimer, and this is from NC State University. A safe space is a place or environment in which a person or a category of people can feel safe and confident that they will not be exposed to discrimination, criticism, harassment, or any other emotional or physical harm. I am not here to shame or blame or guilt people. I'm not here to shake my finger at anybody. If you respect me and what I am trying to do here, then I will respect you. So allyship. An ally is someone who makes the commitment and effort to recognize their privilege based on gender, class, race, sexual identity, etc., and work in solidarity with oppressed groups in the struggle for justice. Allies understand that it is in their own interest to end all forms of oppression, even those from which they may benefit in concrete ways. Allies commit to reducing their own complicity or collusion in oppression of those groups and invest in strengthening their own knowledge and awareness of oppression. So I'm a little bit of a linguistics nut, and we love to do something in language where we nominalize verbs and then verbalize nouns. And we get ally from to align. And now we've kind of started making ally a verb again. So we've gone from align to ally, and now ally being a verb. And I say ally is a verb now because it has to be a conscious choice. It has to be an action. We ally ourselves. And if you are here right now, then you have already made that action. You have already made that conscious choice. You have made that investment to strengthen your knowledge and awareness of oppression. And so I want to thank you for being here today. So thank you. Thank you for making ally a verb for you. Thank you for being here. Kellen, thanks you too. So these two terms aren't really DEI terms. Kellen, please go back in your room, baby. These two aren't DEI terms, but I wanted to throw them at you. Anytime there is a disconnect or there is a disagreement in language between language that a marginalized group uses about themselves and the language that is used to describe them, if there's a, I apologize, sometimes words that I am trying to use leave my brain right as I'm trying to say them. If there is ever a disagreement between words that a group uses to describe themselves and words that are used to describe them, I will always use the words that the group themselves use. And in anthropology, we call these emic and etic terms. Emic are the terms and ideas that come from within the culture, and etic terms are from an outside perspective. Sometimes you'll see etic terms defined as the neutral terms, but more often than not, they are terms that are placed on that culture or on those people. And if you've ever taken one of my Romani persona building classes, you will know how important it is to me to use the terms and the words that the people themselves use for themselves. So anytime it comes up where there is that disconnect, I will always use emic terms. Definition of personal autonomy. And if you were in my last class, you already saw this. And that is the capacity to be one's own person, to live one's own life according to reason and motives that are taken as one's own and not the product of manipulation or distorting external forces, to be in this way independent. And I know you can't see all the italicized small print in this image, but personal autonomy is your choice. It's your choice on your personal, your person and your health. It's your choice about privacy and security, interpersonal connections. It's your life and it's your choice. And this becomes a really big deal when we start talking about disability and neurodivergence. But consent, and this is just a dictionary definition from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and that is to give assent or approval. And again, if you were in my previous class, you saw this, and that's consent is freely given, it's reversible, it's informed, it's enthusiastic, and it's specific. Ableism, and this is from the Center for Disability Rights. Ableism is a set of beliefs or practices that devalue or discriminate against people with physical, intellectual, or psychiatric abilities, and often result on the assumption that disabled people need to be fixed in one form or another. And that needing to be fixed comes up again here in a little bit. And this is really important, and this distinction between disability and an impairment. And a disabled person is a person with an impairment who experiences a disability. Disability is a result of a negative interaction that takes place when a person with an impairment and his or her, and I shouldn't have put that, I apologize. I'm going to change that to their social environment. Impairment is thus a part of a negative interaction, but it is not the cause, nor does it justify disability. So the difference is an impairment is the thing. It is an injury, illness, or cognitive condition that causes or is likely to cause a loss or difference in physiological or psychological function. It's just that. It is just the injury or illness or cognitive condition. The disability comes in with the loss or limitation of opportunity to take part in society on an equal level with others due to social and environmental barriers. So the impairment is physical. The disability is social. Another way to look at this is the medical model versus the social model. The medical model is the person is disabled by an abnormality and defect of their own body or brain. The disabled person is broken, abnormal, or a damaged version of a human being and should be fixed or cured and or prevented. Since the disabled person's impairment prevented them from functioning normally, they need a caregiver and professional to make decisions for them. And that's where the autonomy comes back in, is in the medical model, it's believed that they need someone else to make a decision for them. The disabled person is an object of charity and the receiver of help. The disabled person should adjust to fit into society, since they are the one who is not normal. Being a part of society means rising above a disability. Versus the social model, where the person is disabled by their environment. It's physical, attitudinal, communication, and social barriers. Disabled people are normal, valid varieties of human beings and should have equal rights and access to society just as they are. Since the disabled person is inherently equal, they have right to autonomy, choice, and free and informed consent in their own lives. The disabled person should be supported by society because they are equal and have a right to inclusion. Their community should adjust its own barriers and biases. Neurodiversity, and this is from the Neurodiversity Network. Neurodiversity is just the diversity of human brains and minds, the infinite variation in neurocognitive functioning within our own species. Neurodivergent, sometimes abbreviated as ND, means having a brain that function in ways that diverge significantly from the dominant societal standards of normal. Neurotypical, often abbreviated NT, means having the style of neurocognitive functioning that falls within the dominant societal standards of normal. And then the quote over here by Harvey Bloom says, neurodiversity may be every bit as crucial for the human race as biodiversity is for life in general. Who can say what form of wiring will prove best at any given moment? An invisible illness / Spoonie. And this is from the Invisible Disabilities Association. An invisible illness is a physical, mental, or neurological condition that is not visible from the outside, yet can limit or challenge a person's movements, senses, or activities. Spoon theory is the intellectual property of Christine Miserandino and is published on her website, www.youdon'tlooksick.com. You have probably heard someone say that they are having a low spoon day or that they are out of spoons. Spoon theory is popular among those with invisible illnesses, as it is a perfect way to explain the choices we have to make every day due to the limited amount of energy, using spoons as a metaphor for a unit of energy. Lovely image of spoons. This is my backdrop on my computer to remind myself to count my spoons. Person first language versus identity first language. And this is going to be one of those cases where I use emic versus etic language, because there is a big controversy here on when or whether we should use person first language or identity first language. Person first language puts the person before the diagnosis. The thinking behind this is that the person is more than their diagnosis. Example, a person with autism. The problem with this is it highlights that most people see ASD, or the autism spectrum disorder, specifically as other forms of neurodivergence as a disease, as something we need to find a cure for. In the autism, and this is a quote by Autistic Hoya, which is an autism blogger. In the autism community, many self-advocates and their allies prefer terminology such as autistic, autistic person, autistic individual, because we understand autism as an inherent part of an individual's identity, the same way one refers to Muslims, African Americans, lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, Chinese, gifted, athletic, or Jewish. The best way I can describe this, one of my best friends is an autistic queer. And when describing person first language versus identity first language to me, she said, I hate it when people say I am a person with autism. I want to look at them and say, I wouldn't say I'm a person with queer. No, I'm a queer person. I'm an autistic person. So a little bit of a breakdown for person first, identity first. Person first is I'm a person with a disability versus I am disabled. I am a person with blindness. I am blind. I am a person with autism. I am autistic. And then from identityfirstautistic.org, person with autism makes it sound like it's baggage that someone's carrying around versus autistic person. It's part of their identity. Another way of thinking about this, and it goes back to seeing neurodivergence and parts of people's identity as a disease, is me personally, I have fibromyalgia, and I would never refer to myself as a fibromyalgic person. You wouldn't hear that. I am a person with fibromyalgia, because fibromyalgia is seen as a disease. It's seen as something that needs to be treated or cured. And it's the way I view it myself. It is something that I carry with me. It's something that I need to be treated. It's something that I need to manage so that I can function. So I can see why neurodivergent people would feel insulted by saying person with autism, because that's putting autism in the same category as something like fibromyalgia. In the medical world, you're not making a distinction. You're saying that it's just a disease. It's something that needs to be eradicated. It's something that needs to be treated or cured. And that's incredibly ableistic. It's incredibly harmful, and it's incredibly insulting. So that's that first disconnect. That's that first use, at least in this class, of emic versus etic language. And there's a hashtag. If you, specifically on Twitter, there's an entire community of actually autistics on Twitter that use that hashtag. And there's a big movement right now to move from person first language to identity first language in the neurodivergent community. So the next term is trauma. And I think that that's a word that gets used a lot and used incorrectly. It is a psychological term. And this is from the American Psychological Association. And trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, abuse, or natural disaster. Immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical. Longer term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches or nausea, chronic pain, and fatigue. Some things that cause trauma, this is certainly not an exhaustive list, but some things are traffic accidents, natural disasters, childhood abuse, rape or sexual assault, physical assault, being robbed or stabbed, mass disasters, terrorist attacks, combat or war exposure, torture or kidnapping, and intimate partner violence. Trigger. This is another word that gets used a lot. People are either saying they're triggered when they mean they are offended, or people are accusing others of overusing the word trigger. So what is a trigger? And this is from Trauma-Informed Care in Behavioral Health Services. A trigger is a stimulus that sets off a memory of a trauma or specific portion of a traumatic experience. So if we go back to trauma, this is an emotional response. This is a real, visceral, physical response. So a trigger is something that happens in the real world that immediately pulls you back into that traumatic experience. This isn't being uncomfortable. This isn't being anxious. This isn't being scared. This isn't being any number of other icky feelings. This is being pulled back into a traumatic experience. This is a very real mental health concern. This is a very real psychiatric concern. The wonderful large world of fandom has created an alternative word, which is squick, which is a portmanteau, a combination of two words, of squeamish and ick, which is loosely defined as disturbed or disgusted by something. That says disguised. That is supposed to say disgusted by something, which I absolutely love because it's an excellent word to use in social media if something disgusts you or disturbs you, makes you feel uncomfortable, is really displeasing to you. Squick is an amazing word to use and is much more appropriate than to say you're triggered by something. So the image over here is not a trigger. It's normal to feel upset, anxious, or extremely uncomfortable when we encounter difficult content. Having these strong reactions is normal, and learning to regulate them is part of a healthy emotional development. Is part of healthy emotional development. Kellen, mommy is teaching. A trigger. Trauma triggers are different. They often include a loss of a person's sense of time, space, and or self. Emotion is amplified, completely muffled, or sometimes seemingly unrelated to a situation. Triggers are like a trap door in the brain.
Castiana?
Yes.
I have an application question about triggers.
Certainly.
And this is layman's terminology. I'm just trying to match what my experience in the past has been with people.
Okay.
Would a lay person possibly, for if someone were to undergo a trigger reaction to something, would a lay person possibly consider that analogous to a panic attack?
Everyone responds to triggers differently, and from the outside, different people who suffer from panic attacks have different symptoms.
Okay.
Using myself as an example, I suffer from panic attacks and I do have CPTSD. So from the outside, if you were to witness a dissociative episode, a CPTSD episode, and if you were to witness a panic attack, to you, they may look the same.
Okay.
But that is just me. Everybody is going to be different.
Okay, so no hard and fast rule.
None
Okay,
whatsoever.
Cool. That answers my question. Thank you.
The genderbread person. And this is from an absolutely wonderful website, and this is genderbread.org. They also have a blog that's called, it's pronounced metrosexual. The image is more there just for fun, not necessarily as an infograph. And this is the breakdown between anatomical sex, and I meant to change that. I didn't, I changed it over here and not over here. Anatomical sex can be very problematic, and I should have changed that. And I'll explain why that can be problematic. But this is the breakdown of chromosomal sex, gender identity, gender expression, and attraction, and why all these words seem to get conflated and jumbled and mixed up and misused. Chromosomal sex, which is sometimes called biological sex, anatomical sex, or physical sex, is comprised of things like genitals, chromosomes, hormones, but the one thing it's not is gender. Chromosomal sex is also referred to, slightly crowbar separation definition, but also sex assigned at birth. It's the checkbox they mark on your birth certificate, male or female. But it is based on chromosomal things. And the reason anatomical is problematic is because intersex individuals exist, people who are born with neither or both anatomical parts. So saying anatomical sex can be problematic. So chromosomal sex is a much more appropriate term, and I should have changed that on the left-hand side. Gender identity, your physiological sense of self, who you are in your head, who you in your head know yourself to be, based on how much you align or don't align with what you understand to be the options for gender. And this is hard to explain without breaking down societal views on gender. And that could be an entire 1-hour class all on its own. But I think the most important takeaway for gender identity is it's who you know yourself to be in your head. It's nothing about what you look like. It's nothing about what other people think you are. It's nothing about your chromosomes or what boxes checked on your birth certificate. It is who you know you are inside your head. Gender expression. And that's the way you present your gender through your actions, clothing, demeanor, and more. It's your outward facing self and how that's interpreted by others based on gender norms. Your gender expression and your gender identity can align or not align. And I think that can be confusing for a lot of people, both people who are trying to understand the genderbread person model and people who are trying to figure out their own gender identity. Some people know themselves to be male. Their gender identity is masculine, but they present more androgynous than masculine. Or some days they present masculine, some days they present feminine. But their identity, who they know they are, is male. And then attraction, like sex, attraction isn't really a component of gender. However, we often conflate sexual orientation with gender or categorize the attraction we experience in gendered ways. But attraction is who we like, but it has nothing to do with who we are. I am not sure if I explained that very well. So chromosomal sex is determined by hormones and chromosomes. Gender identity is your physiological sense of self, your psychological sense of self, who you know you are. Gender expression is how you present yourself, and attraction is who you are attracted to. I am going to stop right there because that's probably one of the hardest breakdowns in this class. Are there any questions?
You've done an excellent job with the material, and you're right. I don't think you're going to get a better definition in under 2 hours.
Okay, I have more slides. I just wanted to start there because that's one of the hardest breakdowns.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, and I kind of touched on this when I touched on chromosomal sex. Sex or gender assigned at birth. And this is the sex, either male or female, because currently that is how our birth certificates in the United States are marked, assigned to a child at birth, most often based on the child's external anatomy. And it also refers to, also referred to as birth sex, natal sex, biological sex, or just the child's sex. So a cisgendered person is any person whose gender identity, which is who you know yourself to be, whose gender identity and assigned sex at birth correspond. That's all that cisgender means. If your gender identity matches the gender you were assigned at birth, you are cisgender. Transgender describes a person whose gender identity and gender assigned at birth do not correspond. Also used as an umbrella term to include gender identities outside of male and female. So transgender can be someone who was assigned male at birth, but whose gender identity is female. It can be someone who is assigned female at birth, but whose gender identity is male. But it also encompasses the entire spectrum of non-binary or gender non-conforming genders. And then gender non-conforming describes a gender expression that differs from a given societal, that differs from the given societal norms of male or female. Any questions on that one? Okay. And diversity. Diversity is the presence of difference. It's that simple. Diversity just means presence of difference. This can refer to people of different races, genders, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, religions, national origins, dominant languages, mental and physical abilities, etc. Equality versus equity. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. In the first, and I love the giving tree, so I had to use this. In the first side, we see that the tree is tilted to the left. We see an example of inequality. The apples are only going to fall to the left. Equality, question mark? both children are given the exact same thing. They are both given an equally tall ladder. That's equality. They're both given exactly the same thing. But in this case, given the exact same thing is only perpetuating the inequality. The tree is still leaning to the left, and only one of them is able to collect the apples. Equity is giving one person, the person who is on the side of the tree, that on the side that the tree is leaning against, a taller ladder. Yes, one person has a taller ladder than the other, but now both of them have equal access to the ladders. Justice would be fixing the inequality. It would be straightening the tree. Inclusion. Inclusion means that people with marginalized identities feel as if they not only genuinely belong, but are also valued and relied upon. Diversity is having a seat at the table. Inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice be heard. It's not enough just to be diverse. It's not enough just to have equity. We need to have all three. We need to be diverse. We need to be equitable, and we need to be inclusive. Because in diversity and equity results in cultural assimilation, results in disengagement and low retention. Equity and inclusion without diversity is oversaturation of similarity, homogeneous culture, and simplified viewpoints. Inclusion and diversity without equity is that the dominant group or ideology is deferred to for decision-making, opportunities, and promotion. But if you have all three, you get a community of belonging, an organization that engages full potential of the individual, where innovation thrives and views, beliefs, and values are integrated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No, that was,
How'd I do on that one? Hey, that one was my hour. That's amazing.
yeah, no, that was very well done, Castiana. That was very well done.
Yeah.
I definitely think, if I had to guess, I would say a lot of those definitions will probably be different in a year.
Of
just
course.
By
Always.
cultural weight.
And they were different from a year ago.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's the way the world works.
I am curious if we're going to start seeing some SCA centric vocabulary start to develop and reach mainstream within the society. That would be, because and this is just one of those ones, and this is strictly the linguist bug in me kind of comes out, but we have enough Latin and Greek guys to do this. Transgender, literally trans means change or transition. So I'm just wondering if they're going to find a term that's more applicable for that spectrum you talked about. And then, of course, even if they did, to see if it's adopted by the transgendered community within the society. And that's strictly I'm curious because I know the eggheads involved, not we should or we need to.
Gee, I wonder if you could find a non-binary person who took 3 years of Latin in school.
You took 3 years of Latin?
Yes.
File that under things I didn't know, but probably should have. No, and I say that just because the biggest joke in the SCA is when we deal with some big heady problem, there's always the chapter in the story where, and I say this with all love and respect, I do, all of the eggheads get involved, and you're like, Oh, wow. There's a whole lot more here. I'm not sure I was ready to learn. I didn't know you spoke Latin. That's
I can read it. I don't know that I could translate from English into Latin anymore. My
okay.
my declensions aren't nearly what they used to be. I doubt I could remember all the word endings. No.
I have no mastery of language whatsoever. I'm a native speaker of English and that's it. And with a father who grew up bilingual in Spanish and English, I'm actually ashamed to say I don't speak Spanish. But you know, for people who even had the wherewithal to study 3 years of it, I just tip my hat to you.
I come from a polyglot family and I speak English.
On that note, I am
You
teaching
speak it
next,
comprehensively.
so I have to run. But wonderful class, seriously, Cassiana. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you all for being here.
Again, I appreciate how you break things down. You make it seem very clear and comprehensible. I appreciate that immensely.
Certainly.
Okay, and I am also out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.